This podcast show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of this podcast show. It is not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The program is hosted by Brian Nord and Erik Rojas. The point of this YouTube podcast is to question, research, unpack, and deconstruct. Through new information, critically thinking, and exercising free speech, we are answering the question, how did I get here? Our hosts have been speaking up in response to a bombshell memoir that has been blowing up social media. Is This a Cult? By author and Peterson. Available on Amazon, release in March 2024. If you would like to support the hosts or the channel, please click to subscribe to the channel and like this video. This is episode number 9. What have we learned so far? Where do we go from here? A live Q&A with the author herself.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name's Erik Rojas, and I'm one of the hosts of this show, How Did I Get Here? And I'm joined with Ann Peterson. And it's so good to have you back. And today we don't have Brian. Brian's on vacation, and he'll be missed. So it'll be myself and Ann today. Ann, thank you so much for filling in those shoes.
Big shoes. I told Brian I'll keep the seat warm, I promise, and we'll make you look good. So, yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Yep. And I love the background. We were talking about, Ann and I were talking beforehand, how we're both in our backyards and Ann's building this beautiful home. And that's just like an amazing view that you have there.
It is. I'm in another place, but that's literally a picture from the lot. I'm in a place with a little bit stronger internet connection than the camper trailer provides right now. But that is the view that we see in the morning. And we're getting ready. We're building our dream home and forever home. And it's really great. It's like one of those things, when my husband, Dave Peterson, who many people know, and I were dating, we would talk about, our dreams. And one of our dreams was to build a house on the Puget Sound. And here we are celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this year. And that'll be about the same time the foundation's going in the ground. So we're super excited.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So cool. Today we're going to get into a lot of things, and we have some Q&A. So if you're watching us, please, you can start to maybe insert some questions or at least start to think about some of the questions that you'll have. We're going to ask Ann at the end of the show today. But before we get into it, we wanted to talk about some of the news that we heard over the weekend, which is that Landmark announced that they're going to be laying off a significant amount of their employees and staff, citing historic low levels of participation and revenues. And correct me if I'm wrong, if we heard this correctly, but I think they said something like projected $11 million of revenue.
Yeah.
And I don't know if
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know if that's strictly North America or if it's the entire company, but I just remember when I was a staff member, revenues were well in the 90 million range.
Right. Yeah, me too. So I left my official employment with Landmark in 2012. And then, as most of you who've read the book know, I went from there on to host through my own business, host a program, being a leader in the effective exercise of leadership for Werner Erhard and Mike Jensen and a group of colleagues. And, but I was part of the ESOP until I cashed out in 2022, actually. And because there's a bunch of rules about how you can get your money out and so forth. But anyway, the last financial reports that I had seen close to that time when I left staff is the annual revenues were in the neighborhood of 90,000. What I was told via these announcements. 90 million, right. So what I was told via these announcements going around, I've been a handful of people have contacted me and said that they are citing revenues around 41 million in 2019 and projections of 11 million for 2024, which honestly, Eric, can I just say, like, and to everybody out there listening and is listening to this in the coming weeks, and I'll be talking about it a little bit on my show with Mark Tafoya as well, but, my heart goes out really in big ways to the staff and even to the executives. Like, it's, we all know what it's been like to be a part of the dream that is a world that works for everyone through this enterprise. And while, yes, we are exposing the cracks in that foundation and that fissure, but for me, initially, my book was actually a warning. And I knew some of this stuff was happening. I knew it was already in the works, in large part, in the majority, because of the pandemic. I don't actually know a seminar company like Landmark that has really made it through the pandemic. So, I know, I was hearing at the time, because I have a lot of friends on staff and who are in the ESOP, the Employee Stock Option Plan, for those that aren't familiar with that, that in 2021, they were almost going to have to close their doors. In 2022, without an influx of cash, they were, right on the edge. 2023, this time has been devastating on any seminar company, particularly one that was still organized the way Landmark was, with heavy real estate commitments and in person, at a time when the whole world shut down and stopped doing in person. And I can tell you, as somebody who has, an event business, in person has not come back. Personal growth and development in person has not come back at all. So, I'm sure there's some people out there go, oh, it's because of Anne's book, blah, blah, blah. No, these plans have been in motion for a while.
Well, we've gotten letters. I mean, as an ESOP member myself, I've gotten those letters. Over the years, like Landmark's historic low revenues, we almost went out of business and then we didn't, and then we almost went out of business and we didn't. And I just, sorry to cut you there, but I also want to say, like, I know some staff members that are likely getting let go who have been there for so long. And as someone who had been around for so many years, I can only imagine the people that have been there for decades, who are now going to have to navigate the workforce and how competitive the workforce is today. And it's not, look, being a Landmark staff member isn't like any other job out there. It's difficult to articulate the skill set that you have as a staff member on a resume. And I say that for myself, as someone who was a staff member when I was really young, and then who left and who had to figure out how I was going to make a living. And as we've talked about in Brian's, with Brian, who has also been navigating this workforce, when you plug in on LinkedIn, people look up who Landmark is, and they look up Landmark, and like the second thing that gets populated automatically through the Google algorithm is Landmark Occult, or some of the controversies that it's had over the years. So it's just going to be so challenging for those people who literally poured their lives into this. And so that was one of the initial things that I thought of too, was, we've all
been there. And I mean, I've coached people for years about, when you leave Landmark, it is not what you think it is, because you're kind of told also you're like this elite performer and you're going to be in high demand and all this kind of stuff, because part of the honestly, in my world, it's kind of a scam, but part of the thing is that, you're working for low pay and long hours for two reasons. You're saving the world and you're getting elite training. Those are the two main narratives when you're a staff member. And then you leave staff and you find out that neither one of those things are true. Right. Not that you didn't make a difference. Absolutely. You make where you made a difference, person to person to person. You did that, and you keep on hold of that, and you're going to keep doing that because that's who you are. It's not about Landmark, about you. So that's not what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about the whole narrative that somehow transformation, we're going to transform the planet and we're going to have a world that works for everyone. Look, those are great aspirations, and those are fantastic on a poster on your wall, but they are not a career situation or a career move. And that's part of, I see Grant Peck is kind of asking, what do I think it would take for Landmark and so on. And I'm happy to answer that in greater length, but just as it ties to this thing, when you leave Landmark, folks, first thing you're going to have is some relief, because you're going to get some darn sleep. So that's the first thing. You're just going to get some sleep, and you're going to find out that your nervous system is racked. Many of us find out that we were ill more ill than we understood because we get really good at pushing through. So the first thing is to take care of your well-being and, to the best of your ability. But then you start to kind of deal with the shock that you're talking about. Even if you can translate your skills into normal language, because that's the other thing, you talk funny.
Yeah.
And, you use language funny, you use words for things other than what they're meant for and so forth. But even if you get up through all that and you can translate that, and I'm actually looking at some friends and whatnot that I have that help do resume services and whatnot, because part of our commitment with our partnership with Seek Safely is to create a recovery route for people coming out of these kind of high control groups. And this is one of the things, like, how do I parlay my skills? But then exactly like you said, Erik, people are going to look up and go, but you work for Landmark. I mean, I ran into this when I was filling programs with the universities. I would be like, yeah. And it was always a problem that Landmark was on the copyright at the bottom. They would literally sit in the prep room where they're working on the slides and see how small they could make Landmark on the copyright, because in the university setting, Landmark didn't have a great reputation. It was known as this sort of goofy, new agey self-help, if not all the way into the cultish kind of world, which is an ongoing question, has been since its inception. But
Yeah.
it was not a legitimate academic, rigorously, hadn't passed the test of academic rigor. So anyway, it was challenging there. And so even when you translate the skills, but then you gotta say, okay, but I just spent, especially for those that are very long range, those are the ones that are going to have the most challenging times. Those that have been there for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, that's really challenging because they don't have
and also, like, your life is the Landmark environment is such a high pressure environment, and when you're let go of that environment and you go back into normal like life out here, it's just not like that. And so I remember for myself thinking, like, I wasn't doing enough with my life, or like there was that void that was missing there. So look, I just anyway, we don't need to get into super into it.
Can we pick up, Erik, can we pick up a little bit on the question that Grant asked as it relates to I think we can kind of address his question a little bit throughout, because we were going to kind of look at what we've learned even so far. But, Grant, you're asking, what would it take for Landmark to have a resurgence of revenue, right? Would a rebrand? Absolutely, a rebrand will not work. It will not work. They have done it 5 times. Rebrands.
They're doing it right now.
They're doing it right now,
and it's not working.
They've done it. We've sat through several. They're not. In my opinion, that will not work. And and one of the things I want to say here is, to get at what will work, you often have to go through and examine what won't work. And this is where companies fail again and again and again. This is not unique to Landmark. They do not look in the mirror sufficiently to see where their practices and modality, and sometimes even their product, is outdated. I promise the people who were selling buggy whips were trying to sell them right to the very end. And is that, do I think it would take for Landmark?
Well, I just think of like Blockbuster and all of these places, it's like that there was all like Netflix and all that stuff was coming out, and they were still holding on to what they could.
To me, what's at the heart, and this is probably a much longer conversation we're going to have today. I'm, going to be having this a lot in the coming weeks. We have a really exciting guest on Friday that we're going to talk about, who was there when they created the forum. So to me, and said simply, I do think there's an avenue for Landmark. I don't think they're willing to do what it would take to take it. But one of the core things is they continually refuse to look at the foundation. They continually refuse to really look. They say they look at the work, but they don't. I've been in those rooms. What they look for is validation of the core ideas, the foundational transformational technology that Werner sort of created in 70s. I mean, we now know, I've literally talked to people who were in the room, that they took an enormous amount of stuff straight from Scientology, straight from mind dynamics, a little Gestalt, throw in a little Zen, mix it up, put it in a new package. And hey, look, I don't even think that's necessarily a bad thing. That's kind of what most creativity looks like. But they're still employing methods, largely the LGAT format, that just we've seen doesn't work, and people just aren't going to put up with it anymore. People don't want to be driven into the depths of hell in order to get to paradise in a 48-hour period with no sleep. And it doesn't last. So fundamentally, as I've gotten more into studying this, and as I have been doing, and I'm in questing for how do we make self-development safe and ethical. That's what I'm looking for. So in the looking for that, I keep finding the things that aren't that as well. And Landmark's core methodology is not that. So
Yeah.
I think they'd have to let go of the Werner addiction, which this is what my book's about, is that kind of a warning, like alert, 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 tying yourself back to Werner is not a good idea. Just conventionally, because there's a lot of news is going to come out about him in the next year. It's going to be much worse than what you read in my book. And, Landmark was tying themselves back into those foundational things that stopped working in the 80s. MLMs, Landmark's entire sales model is based on an MLM model. MLMs, direct sales, with the exception of a couple, don't work.
Right.
So, they have continually not upgraded to get into social media marketing. That, there's so many things. This is such a big conversation, but the short answer to your question, Grant, is I don't know a rebrand won't work. I do think the field has very much changed. People aren't willing to sit for as long. A lot of the ideas are available in a lot of other places without all the pain. For sure.
Well, I just think
that's
the
something you
consumer
discover
has
when you get
changed.
out. Yeah, and honestly, the entire industry of personal development and self-help is really trying to find itself right now. I don't know anybody in the event world that isn't struggling, minus one or two that have kind of a little niche market that they maintain through the pandemic. But everybody else, I mean, even Tony Robbins is struggling. So my big thing is I don't want the staff blaming themselves. And it's easy in the Landmark culture because that's the management style, is you're the reason why we're not producing. And it is my understanding they're on that call saying North America is failing. Well, how are all those staff members in North America feeling when they say that? They're not translating that like North America. They're saying, no, I'm failing, because that's the whole management style. Foment a crisis and then pound on people to produce. That's the model.
Yeah. It's definitely not the staff's fault. It's the business and how it's set up is not one that is designed to succeed in 2024. That today's consumer is completely different. I'm a consumer in this field, and I could tell you, I'm not going to go sit on Zoom for 3 days and an evening to get that what's been there between me and my family, or me and my friends, or me and my career, or me and my finances, whatever, is a racket, or whatever Landmark's distinctions there are. I mean, it's just, there are other ways to do it, and you can see.
Well, they rely on the LGAT thing, right? Like, so you're a racket, you're an asshole, you're a
the large for those of you who the LGAT is a large group awareness training, and I think Anne might have frozen there for a sec. But what Anne's basically talking about is that they no longer have the model to have you sit there in person and take you through the peaks and the valleys of what it looks like to in that model, but so by the time you get to Sunday, that you're basically on top of the world here. So it looks like Anne froze. And one thing that I do want to acknowledge, and I do want to say about this as well, is that Landmark may try to say that because of Anne's book and because of the book she wrote in March, or they might try to say that because of this podcast, that this is why they're having an issue with revenues, and it's just not the case. It's been happening for a long time, ever since the pandemic, even before the pandemic. But people just don't want to share about it, and nowadays people look online and they see all these different articles, and so that's problematic. I just had Ann texted me. Hold on a sec. I'm trying to get her back. It says she's getting back. She had an issue with her internet. All right. So one of the things that we wanted to also get into is we think that a good portion of these layoffs are going to be people who used to assist who are now getting paid. They're part of the Landmark Training Academy. And there was a lawsuit in the United States that we believe was the reason why the Landmark Assisting Program ended. And we don't need to get into the entire complaint simply because it's really long and a lot of pages. But let's just, there was a group of people who assist who basically claimed that they had been by the way, this is all public knowledge. You can find this you could find this online. We obviously found it online. But essentially, this person had been a participant in the team management and leadership program. They had been a participant in the introduction leaders program, and they went back and forth about how this individual had been assisting, and oftentimes 12 hours or more a day. And for those of you who know, who used to be people who assist, you knew that it was common for us to assist for long periods of time without pay. And eventually what ended up happening is they ended up going to mediation, and Landmark eventually settled the case outside of court because this is what they do. They didn't want this to go to trial. And we don't need to get into all of the details of what this case was and, all of that entails. But I will say, I just wanted to include those documents because we're not making stuff up here, and we've been doing a lot of research to try to find and answer the question, how did I get here? And in asking that question, we've been identifying like what's happened, what's been going on legally, what's been going on internally with that organization. Some of us are speaking out because of that. So let's see here. I'm just going through some of these questions. So this individual is asking, are you familiar with Vanto Group? Do they have the same practices and toxic culture? Well, I'll tell you, Vanto Group is owned by Landmark. They are a subsidiary of Landmark. In terms of their practices and toxic culture, I can't speak to that because I didn't work at Vanto Group, but I can tell you, I know some people that do work there and have worked there. And I can tell you that some of the people have not shared what I am sharing, but I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't heard from anybody at the Vanto Group. Let's see. Somebody's asking, what is that lawsuit? When was it? Can you give us the URL so you can see it? Sure. So this lawsuit was filed in the state of California, and you can find it online. Let's see here. Hold on a second. Looks like we're getting Ann back. This lawsuit was filed on June 29th, 2022. Hey, Ann, you there?
I am. And can we?
I was just catching you.
I see where you're at. Sorry about that. The good news is there's ocean and beach. The bad news is across 3 internet things, which took us a while. Regarding some of the questions are asking what, where, when. Richard, reach out to me. I'll share with you what the link is. We'll look at putting up a
anyway, it's all public knowledge, and we'd be glad to share it with you. So basically, it was in 2022, and the why we don't know for a fact, right? Because we haven't read the settlement, but I could tell you one of the reasons why we have reason to believe is when Landmark was going through the mediation, which is here. When Landmark was going through the mediation, they had their mediation meeting shortly after they ended the Landmark Assisting Program.
Well, anyway, I'm not at liberty to say who, but there are people in positions to know that while they didn't share this specific lawsuit, so there was a couple of it was pretty clear it was a stick, not a carrot. So the thing that it costs so much and so on, that is just plain not true. That what cost a lot is having to pay all those people. So the assisting program through the Department of Labor, several investigations going back as far as 1996, opinions were issued.
Even recent, Ann. I mean, here's another case in Texas in 2006. Was a
This was
Dallas.
the big one. Yeah. My husband was
This
actually
was a
there when that happened.
this was an investigation into the landmark assisting program where they were basically, again saying that the people that were assisting, that it was illegal the way landmark had set up the landmark assisting program. Now this is in 2006. Okay, the complaint that I'm talking about that we have reason to believe shut down the landmark assisting program was in 2022, and landmark settled that case in December of 2023. Now we do not have the settlement because the settlement was
It's private.
it was private. It's between the plaintiff and Landmark, who's the
And
defendant.
what I was given to understand was within 60 days of the judge saying, no, this cannot be arbitrated, that it must go to a jury trial, the assisting program was shut down. And which that is about how long the run up it was taking to get that ready to be able to shut that down, which is very quick for Landmark. Anybody who's worked for Landmark for a long time knows 16 days is like lightning speed. But particularly
Landmark,
something that's embedded as the assisting program. So the assisting program came to an end, and they started up the academies, which is following a business model of a lot of similar organizations. I have personally, I have concerns about that model as well. I've seen that model in the yoga world, and it leads to quite a bit of exploitation itself as people get certifications that aren't marketable, that they're, stuff that they get things that they don't have an inherent value to them beyond the personal value, which is fabulous. In which case, do it as a program, and say, hey, these are the kinds of things you might get out of it or not. Which I guess is sort of what they tried to do. So I don't know. I think that they've tried valiantly. I think they've continually been remarkably, in my opinion, 10 to 15 years behind the current market and what's going on, and sort of understanding it and what's working and the ways in which the internet has changed things. But they've got a foot nailed to the floor because they're very locked into a particular model that is their product. So the product, I think, also gives them troubles. Their product relies on having an audience to create that group experience, which, we now know from some of the people studying it is creates a kind of hypomanic state. And
correct.
That, it relies on that, and you come out of there and you're like, whoa, and you do the most natural thing in the world, honestly, even if they didn't tell you had to. That was one of the biggest mistakes I've always think they've made. You just leave that whole part out. People are automatically going to share something they think is great. Let them do that. So there's just lots and lots of problems. The model's old. The work is, doesn't include a lot of things we know now about the human brain and how it works. The well-being, the general well-being of people who are in it. There's just so many pieces and parts, and they were staff heavy and real estate heavy, and an organization built for another time. So they've known this is coming. They've been making plans for this. And
totally. Totally. And I think, and the part that kind of really kind of upsets me or bums me out about it is I was a person who assists. I led programs as a volunteer for many years, and now they're paying people, but now they can't afford to pay these people. And I want to get into one other thing. I'm just kind of hashing these out, and then we can get into the Q&A because I had promised this is what we're going to talk about. But the other thing that kind of really bothers me about how they're spinning this, because I guess, Anne, you asked me part of what we want to do is we want to share this information and let people do what they want to do with it. But they're telling people they're in this new era, and part of this new era means consolidation. It means having one major region. We're no longer doing regions. We're no longer doing centers. We're no longer doing centers because we're not doing the in-person. It's like there's this whole narrative that's getting.
That plan been? I mean, this is that plan, or that has been in motion for a long time. I mean, I know, as going back, just from people who worked, again, in positions that were at work on this directly, they were at work at moving to a regional system a long time ago. And it's my understanding from the people who share with me, the impediment has been mostly Joan Rosenberg, because Joan believed very, very heavily in the centers model, because she believed very heavily in the original approach that you got to have people to basically, you know, pound on to produce the results. Their whole model is an old fashioned, it's not even current MLM. It's a very old fashioned MLM model. And the thing about their MLM, you didn't have to sign up. All you had to do was do a program, and then they were working you to bring your family, bring your guests, you know, again and again. And then if you do the leadership programs, the pressure just gets more and more intense. The narrative that your transformation depends on having people in your life to, you know, the pressure, tying your transformation to your ability to bring guests and have people in your life do the program was just a fundamental mistake, in my opinion. And always. And despite that, because their product was impactful for at least a short period of time, that people would have done that anyway. Like, they didn't need to apply that pressure. And you know, there's a lot that, and just so people are clear, we're sharing the information we're sharing. We're not sharing absolutely everything, because there are people who have come to us in confidence, and you know, we have promised
their stories
not share that, but it's compelling enough that we felt safe in putting it out there for y'all to evaluate yourself. So, you know, it was pretty clear that the assisting program came to an end very abruptly, which always implies that doesn't always, but generally implies a stick, not a carrot. Landmark had been told a number of times, going back to 2006 was the most direct, that program violated U.S. labor laws. Finally, somebody sues using U.S. labor laws. Landmark is ordered to take it to trial. They settle immediately. They end the program because they knew the program had legal issues.
It was the case was going to go to trial. The Landmark filed to arbitrate, because most of their agreements are to arbitrate, and the judge denied it. And so the case was going to go to trial. And instead of it going to trial, they went to mediation and settled.
Right. Well, quickly. So
very quickly. And then they announced to the people who assist quite abruptly, like, you know, from the different center managers and such that I've spoken to who were around, and some of who are around, where they basically said, you have to be on one of these 2 or 3 calls or whatever they did. And it's ending at such and such date. That was it. It was like very sudden.
Yeah, the center managers, I believe, were given 10 days notice. The announcements started 7 days out with the wisdom area. Didn't go well, because the transition from you're assisting to now you're paying, even though it was a very low price, was a rough one. I mean, I get it.
People were in different levels, you know.
Yeah. Again, we're dealing with business models that are outdated, outmoded in a time. It was a perfect storm if you add in the pandemic, in a time when, you know, everything's shutting down. You know, everything about their model was not based in the internet. When the internet started, you know, moving, people were moving that way. The organizations I know that have hung on to be able to rebuild are because they had already transitioned it to some extent to internet, but also different kinds of formats, you know, not an intense 3-day format. Now, that all said, do I think they could reinvent? I don't know, maybe. My skepticism is that their unwillingness to look at the really hard questions, right? They need to.
Well, maybe they have a shot now. You know, Harry's stepping down. Joan is stepping down. They're letting go of some of the senior people. So maybe, but they'd have to like really, I don't know. They'd have to really address, they'd have to really address not only the past, they'd have to address what's happening right now and the past in order to move forward. And usually the way they do things is they just move forward.
Right.
So
they declare the past complete. So they have have some meetings, and, you know, you get all the stuff up on the table and and then you declare it complete. And that's one of the aspects of the technology that if you study, you know, the brain, you say, we know that doesn't work. The body doesn't work that way. The body keeps the score. Like, if you just use that simple analogy, when something happens to us, the past, I understand what they're trying to say with that you're not confined by your past, that you're not stuck in who you wound up being, the conversations that you said yourself to be, that you can upgrade and update those. I've taught this stuff for years. So there's aspects of that work, but it doesn't quite work the way it's advertised to work. I mean, I've long said, I've said it on a number of podcasts now, if they're listening, is one, stop trying to be something you're not. Be what you are. You're a weekend lighten the hours, 9 to 6, 9 to 5, and give longer breaks. Let people take notes. Let them sit next to their friends. All those 3 things alone start to diminish the whole LGAP problems that they're seeing, those that are studying those. And then stop with people don't have to dig into their guts and the depths of their soul. You can actually get the concept of racket by looking at something simple. I know this because I'm working for somebody and we do some, not that exact work, but similar in organizations. And people have huge insights without having to drive them into a wall to have them. So, there's a lot of updates to the work itself, but as long as they stay addicted to Werner as the source, they're not going to be able to do that, because they're not going to be able to move away from that. They need to evolve past that. And that's the piece that my book, I was trying to warn about. Like, hey, you guys are going backwards, literally when you need to be going forwards. And, Joe DiMaggio is a brilliant man. Let him design.
And I was going to ask you, you're talking about moving forward instead of moving back to, tying themselves to Werner, but they're tying themselves to Werner by building that landmark hall at CSU Fullerton.
Oh, yeah,
and I just want to bring
that took me over the edge.
I want to talk about that, but I want to talk about some of the misinformation online about it, because I've been reading some of the comments in some of our posts. People don't know that Landmark, even though they're struggling financially and can't afford to pay their staff, and the ESOP, the employee stock ownership plan that people are members of, is like really, really low. And before I want to get your thoughts on this.
Retirement dollars. Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you just from me personally, like my Landmark stock is at an all-time low. But I want to talk about is some of the misinformation. And so I looked up the CSU Fullerton minutes when Landmark met with Cal State Fullerton about this. And they talk about, look, hold on a second.
It's the bottom. It's the last one.
It's right here. So hold on a sec. My Siri's talking to me.
So Cal State is a public university, and the Fullerton campus is the business school. And so their meeting minutes and so forth are public. So these are
this
public.
Is all public. We pulled this straight from
for those that are ESOP holders. You can contrast this with the ESOP letter that you got in 2023, and it's
as an ESOP member, I received a letter, and if you're a Landmark employee or a former employee, you received a letter too. I'm not going to post the letter that Harry sent us. Instead, I think it's probably better to post the minutes, although it would be cool to compare the two of them because they similar but not quite. So it basically says the proposed naming recognizes the gifts of Mr. Terry Giles, who, by the way, is on the board, Landmark's board, and
I'm not sure if he
Landmark
currently
Worldwide Corporation. He was at one point. Maybe he's stepped down. I'm not sure. Of which Mr. Giles is. Oh, well, here it says Chairman Emeritus to support the construction of the Center for Leadership building at Cal State Fullerton. The cumulative giving of $9,100,000 towards this project includes a $1 million personal pledge by Mr. Giles, an additional $2 million directly from Landmark Worldwide, and an additional $6.1 million from Landmark licensees, which are technical affiliates or Landmark affiliates, is kind of what I gather. The total giving to Cal State. Yeah, the total giving to Cal State Fullerton from Terry and his wife, Callie, I believe that's how you pronounce it, exceeds $4 million. The proposed naming recognizes the significant contributions of Mr. Terry Giles, 70, and Landmark Worldwide Corporation. Landmark Worldwide is a company headquartered in San Francisco that offers personal development programs. Landmark Education started in 1991 with the licensing right to use intellectual property owned by Werner Erhard, which we haven't gotten. We've talked about this before, but the part Now, as an ESOP member, I won't get into the letter that Harry sent, but basically the letter said that, just so you know, we as Landmark are going to be using money in your ESOP accounts to help fund this. And we've all decided that that's the best way to use the money that in your retirement accounts is to go towards the funding of this. Now, we didn't go to vote on that, but that's a different
Yeah, this
conversation.
ESOP is run entirely by the board, and
by the board of directors.
There's been iterations where people got to vote on the board. In my time, I can't remember that. Certainly once you left. So it's all shady. Or somebody said to me the other day, they're like, it's turtles all the way down. And I'm not a forensic accountant. I'm not all that. But I know I can see that there's, one statement over here. I mean, right before that money, $8 million, because I kept getting emails asking me to join the team that was raising money for that library. $8 million got raised. Landmark's in financial trouble. Then Landmark isn't in financial trouble. Then $4 million is going to the library. Like all this stuff. It was, as I've said before, when I heard about the library, which I'm calling it a library because that's kind of what it was called internally. It actually can't be called a library because that violates the university rules. So it's called the name of it is the Earhart Center for Leadership Development. And, but ostensibly it's going to house, it's going to hold all of Warner's tapes and all this stuff, and is supposedly going to be managed by Landmark. This is what I was told, so on. And, and the stories change here, there, and everywhere, but it's definitely a big dream of Landmark and Warner's and whatnot. They've been working to be validated by the academic world for years and years and years and years and years and years. And I was a part of that. And I can tell you there's all kinds of shady stuff that goes on around that initiative, making that happen. I actually featured it as part of our Safe Practitioner workshop, which we just started. And we were looking at the promise to be accurate and to really be accurate about our credentials and about what's happening. And literally Landmark could not sign that promise because they don't do that. They do all kinds of shifty stuff.
Well, it's just frustrating for me because somebody asked, like, did they say you weren't going to get your money? But I have not cashed out any of those funds.
No, you're already that's that question. You're already not getting your money. The money's all.
What I was going to say is, my stock account, I'll tell you, is about 25% of what it was worth in 2019. Now, I know Landmark is not in the same position financially, but the letter that I received at the beginning of the year in 2022, or maybe it was 2023, I don't know exactly. I'd have to look at the letter, was that Landmark was doing poorly and that they were about to basically go out of business. Now, if you're not an ESOP member, you're not getting these letters. If you've cashed out your retirement, you're likely not getting these letters. The only reason why I'm getting them is because I never pulled any of my money. And then months later,
pulling my money. I lost about $7,000 hard cash in 2022. I pulled it all. I was able to pull it all out because it had reduced value so low that because you can only pull, you have to wait 5 years.
You can only you have to do
20% a year,
4 or 5 year increments. Yeah. Right. In 5-year increments, you can only withdraw the money in 5-year increments. But and so the months later, so now here we're hearing how they're struggling. They're laying off all these people. And they're paying millions of dollars in this. That doesn't even include all of the
because they're investing. But that's what I mean by Eric. They're investing in the past. They're investing in Warner's.
So that's why I want to get your. I wanted to get your input. Like, what do you think about that? Because they're here. They're clearly tying themselves.
This is why I wrote the book. When I wrote the book, I already was finding out this information about Warner and so forth, and abuse and so on. And some other things. Read the book for those of you that haven't, if you want to know all the different things. And then when that I think it was 2023 when the ESOP letter came out about the 4 million going to the library, and gotta know, like, in each year during the pandemic, the staff was about to all get laid off any minute because they were really struggling. I mean, and they got close to $9 million in PPP loans, which was great. That kept them going for a while. I have no idea, because it's not public record, what the EIDL loan amounts might have been. But like every other organization, they were being, kept afloat by those things. And then to hear, I mean, I had cashed out the year before, but I hear from 2, 3, 4, 5 friends called me and said, you wouldn't believe what they're doing. Like, we've been under threat. Everybody's going to lose their job, blah, blah, blah. And they're putting $4 million into this, Landmark Hall, into this, Earhart Library Center for Leadership, the thing. I mean, people were livid. They were upset, and they had no recourse, because you don't. And, but that for me is what tipped me, because I was like, I'd been trying to warn, like, hey, you guys are tying back to Warner's reputation. There are legal actions in place, in motion. There's reporters on the tail. There's all this stuff going on. I know that stories about Warner are going to be coming out. At that time, I thought originally it was going to come out in 2022, 2023. It kept not happening. There's still things that are in motion. And, whatever. I don't have any specific, like, there's going to be a premiere of a Hulu special on whatever day. I don't have that. I just know there are people that are working on those things. But more than that, I know secrets never stay secret. And then as I found out the secrets, I found out that it's all already out there, There are, now in the age of the internet, we have hundreds of articles about all kinds of problems with Werner Earhart and Associates, and with Landmark, less with Landmark than with the other 2 predecessor organizations. But there's a lot of bad press, like a lot. And there's a lot, and I believe there's more coming. So when I saw that they're going to commit limited resources and tie up to try to say, this is the life and legacy of Werner Earhart, that's what makes it so great, that's why this work works, and this reputation is about to go down, I was like, oh my God, the house is on fire. Whose house? My friends. And so that's when I decided to go public and write my book. And I wrote it to people like me that I knew were going to be finding out all this information, and were going to be lost, confused, having a lot of cognitive dissonance between the value I experienced and finding this information. Richard Eaton asks, I saw it go by. I can't keep track of all the things, but did you not get value out of the assisting program? Absolutely. I got value out of the assisting program. And while I was assisting, my business tanked. My daughter was assaulted and then abused. Like, that assisting came at a really high price that I wouldn't really come to understand for years, but is very clear. And now, since my book came out and literally hundreds of people have come to me with their stories, I found out that my story wasn't a one-off, that the few handful of people that came to me through the years as I was a wisdom course leader, people would come and, come to clear and get complete. And you would hear about nutty things. And I thought, oh man, that's about it. But now I've seen enough and heard from enough people to see that the abuse is systemic. That assault happens, and not just around Werner. By the way, assault and abuse are not the same thing. That having people like the woman in that lawsuit work 30, 40 hours a week for no pay is exploitive.
Right.
I was exploited in terms of my labor. Did I enjoy it? Yeah. Did I know I was being exploited? No. Had I known,
well, I
would
can
I
tell
have
you,
said yes? I don't know. I can't. That's an unanswerable
I
question.
learned, I was kind of reading into this, because you asked me the day, you said, there's what is this about this whole volunteering thing, right? And certain countries will only allow you to volunteer your time if it's tied to a nonprofit. The moment
Or it's
you
tied to
start
certain kinds of
volunteering
tasks.
for, the moment your tasks are around producing a business outcome for a company that is a for-profit, that's when it gets to be illegal in certain countries. And I kind of got thinking about that, and I was like, gosh, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. We were exploited to produce a certain business outcome for Landmark without ever getting paid for it. And
look, Erik, I'm still a little bit of rainbows and unicorns and sunshines. I still look for the best in people, all of this stuff. But I actually honestly believe that they're drinking their own Kool-Aid. I think that they believe what they're saying. I really do. I believed it for a
that
long
you're
time.
Getting more. That you're getting more.
I
out
believed
of
it until
is that what you think?
Yeah. Yes, they believe that. They believe that they're doing a service. They believe that they're creating this altruistic mission where people can save and help their community. All of that stuff. I think, one of the things, if you put a narcissist, a sociopath, or a kind of deluded person on a lie detector, you're gonna get, they're not lying because they believe what they're saying. So I don't know. All of that. I just know that when the impact and consequences of my participation started to be really revealed. And somebody just said something about, I wish all the staff could join hands and collectively release. That is not a thing. That is not a
Yeah.
thing. That's more of the magical thinking nonsense that we have been taught, not just by Landmark, but by many new age self-help, personal development programs. That is not a thing.
Yeah.
I've gotten a bunch of staff together. We have hugged, we have cried, we have talked, we have shared, we have released all kinds of stuff. And the way trauma works is it takes years and years and years. It comes in waves and stages. It takes all kinds of different methods and modalities to fully digest those experiences and
And to use some of
release the
Landmark's,
negative and keep the positive.
I was just going to say, to
Yeah,
use
go
some
ahead,
of
Erik.
Landmark's, because I had a conversation with somebody this past week and they said, well, it sure sounds like maybe what you are is incomplete. And maybe you should reach out to Landmark or reach out to the person who can do something about it. And
More
well,
indoctrinated
I know
nonsense.
you have something to say about this, and I want to hear you say something about the people that say that we're disgruntled, that we're incomplete. Because I keep hearing this from certain people. But also what I want to say, if we use just Landmark's terms, getting complete with something isn't a one-off thing. I mean, isn't that, sure, you have that one conversation and that's an opening, or you quote complete that, but we know that for a lot of times it's like an onion. I mean, it's just like there's
Come on,
many
Erik.
layers to this.
The getting complete line is one of the most exploitive lines there is.
Yeah,
So,
so tell me about that.
I've said this again. And I'll keep saying it, and I'm gonna keep taking it apart for myself. I'm, deconstructing this right now with academics, with professionals, with just really looking, because I'm really curious. And I'm committed that the best people to do it better are those of us that have been in it, but only if we're willing to really look in the mirror and get straight. So getting complete, that's a thought terminating cliche, but we'll put that aside for a sec. For those of you, look up John
I mean, they
Lifton's
want me to call
egg.
Landmark and get complete.
Okay. Okay. So let me make a couple points about this. So first of all, getting complete is a cliche. It's an idea. Okay. And maybe it's a tool that we can start in a conversation and we can create some value for ourselves or whatnot. It can also be used in another way. It can be weaponized or used how it is very, very often. You're just incomplete. You're just incomplete. You're just incomplete. You're not being responsible. No, I'm not incomplete. You haven't dealt with the impact of the abuse and the damage you have done. What is incomplete is that Landmark consistently, again and again and again, and Werner Earhart and Associates before that, and Est before that, have not addressed the impact to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that have been negatively impacted by their programs, and definitely by their staff protocols and even their assisting programs, where they had people assisting that had no business assisting. They should have been in mental health structures. They should have been getting to work on jobs. They should have been, I lost my first business because I was, in part, looking back, I now know what it takes to run a business. Turns out you can't have a volunteer job for an extra 30 hours a week while you're also a single mother and be an entrepreneur of a new business. So
Well, I
lot
can't
of
even imagine
nonsense in that.
today. I put myself in the shoes and some of the people who assist today. I was really young when I was a staff member. I was a person who assists. I didn't have a lot of responsibilities. It was just me. But I'm a father. I have my wife. I have a business. I'm trying to working on taking over another company. I've got, a full life, and I can't even imagine getting myself ready to lead the ILP classrooms on a Friday, or being away at the ILP weekends 4 times in a 6-month period. I can't even imagine. And that is what is required of people to put themselves in there, and to do that is just, yeah.
So I have one
It
more
just,
thing about getting complete. So,
yeah.
you know, and this is a much longer conversation we're going to go in tonight. You and Brian will keep talking about it. Mark and I will keep talking about it. Dale will keep talking about it on her show, the positive uses of the tools and the misuses. So I want to acknowledge there's positive use and misuse. But here's the other thing. Any organization that gets sued for the same thing over and over and over, and they settle because their lawyers tell them you're going to lose. The only suit I've found, or we've found, there's a whole team that's looking at this stuff, but that went to trial is where Landmark sued their attorney for settling, you know, because they didn't like the way the attorney handled it. And because the attorney said blatantly, if you take this to trial, you're going to lose $6 to $8 million, and you could probably settle it for $2 million. And they did. And
so
then they sued their attorney,
I
and then turned around and lost another $1 million of our money, as since we're supposed to be stock held company. But they have been sued again and again and again and again and again. They keep making the same decisions. That's what had me start to ask the question, is this, doesn't work on here, is this a cult? Why did I start asking it? Because the business decisions don't make any sense from a business perspective. They only make sense if you start to put cult goggles on. And people had been asking me that for 40 years anyway. So I was like, well, let me take a look now that I'm out and I have enough distance. But let me just say very explicitly. So what the part of the information that came to me in 2020, a little bit before but through 2020, 2021, is a group of Warner staffers who were trying to get help to stop being physically assaulted and to get, payback that had been taken from them. Went to Landmark, went to Harry Rosenberg looking for help, and Harry didn't help. In fact, he doubled down, he victim blamed, he did all kinds of things, and then participated in them being sued to shut them up. So, do we then think that an organization that's going to do that, and then add to it, how many people, Eric, do you think, you're one of the people who called me and told me how you took, when your center manager choked you in your center, you took it all the way up to Joan Rosenberg, and she wanted to know who you were being that you got choked. You can't complete in that kind of environment. There is no complete. So then you start questioning the environment. Then you start learning the history. Then you start learning all the things that have been buried under the rocks and hidden around the corner. And it's not a pretty journey. It's not fun, but I'll tell you, it's been very healing. I'm more complete now than I was a year ago. I'm more complete now than I was 4 months ago. When my book came out and people started calling me, telling me, thank you, which was lovely. You know, every person who did that, I can't tell you how much that meant. But also telling me their stories, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And I began to see that the abuse that I was thought I was whistleblowing on was systemic and was all over the organization that I had loved and to committed my life to. I cried for months. You know, thank God, I always joke, I have a spiritual teacher, I have a therapist and a coach, and a big address book of a lot of people. I complete every day, every hour, because what I'm hearing is so heartbreaking and so out of integrity. It's hard to put up with. So anyway, the whole go get complete thing makes me a little hot, as you can tell. How come I always get the hottest on your show? So,
well, that's kind of what we're going for here, you know?
Well, it's like sending people to their perpetrator. You're sending people to the person who's
well, that's the whole
the
thing. It's like, they want us to go to yes, it's like, okay, so I call Landmark, and what are they going to say to me? Oh, okay, let's get complete. Like, I really want to hear everything. You know, when this happened with me, when I was a staff member and I went to Joan's office about it, there was a conversation to get complete. And that conversation was, will you just complete this? Will you apologize, essentially, for what's happened here? And that was as complete as it's going to get. We were just going to have a conversation, and I cried. I was so emotional.
And we all saw
but then
we didn't
it was
see
like,
that, but we saw millions of things like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just crying, and then you just hug, and it's like, it's complete now. And by the way, I just want to say something, because I see somebody in the comments here who keeps talking about this abuse. This center manager would call me into the office, the center manager office, close the blinds and close the door so nobody would see this, and choke me with their two hands. There is abuse that happens in that center manager's office that nobody sees because the blinds are closed and the doors closed. And sometimes it looks like a center manager is choking you out. Other times it looks like a center manager cursing you and yelling at you that you're a piece of shit, that this center is going to burn to the ground, that you're the reason why.
Abuse, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. The verbal abuse that happens in that office. And look, yes, those are people, and some people say those are bad apples. And like I've said before, there are many bad apples, but it's not just the center managers, because some of those not all the center managers, but some of those center managers are trained to be that way with the staff. And guess who's training those center managers to be that way with the staff? Joan Rosenberg, who's
at
been,
the very least, they're taking the abuse from above. So I've talked to several that took the abuse and shielded the graduates. They stayed in those positions for a long time, right, to shield the graduates, because they felt like that if they left, then that would get all over the graduates and so on. They didn't want that to happen. Can I address one other thing? Somebody in the chats really does not understand coercive control, abuse, any of that. Richard Eaton, I have a movie list for you. You really need to get in the times that we're living in. So one of the things is you didn't see or experience abuse. Well, first of all, there's a lot of abuse going on in the world that you're not seeing. That doesn't mean it's not happening. The question is, who are you and what are you going to do when you find out, when people tell you directly that it is happening? It happened to me. So there's that piece. The other piece is I didn't either. I had to have a lawyer explain to me what assault was, what abuse was. I watched Werner verbally abuse, and a couple other people on his staff, Hanukkah, verbally abuse people in the most vile ways. And we had been conditioned. There was a whole sort of conditioning that we were going to be seeing that, and that was part of the training, and this whole bullshit thing about ruthless compassion, which two words should never be uttered in the same sentence. It's not a thing. In the name of them being more than a fart in the wind, and they've given me their permission to be treated like that. I would later find out, because I would ask them directly, did you really give permission to be? Absolutely not. Then I had a lawyer friend explain to me that, did you know that you can't even actually give permission to legally to be abused in that way? And no, please, nobody, please don't write me about S&M contracts. I know about that situation. So, but that's not what was going on here at Landmark. So that, it's and it's not just Landmark. So that's the other thing. I'm kind of tired of talking about Landmark in a lot of ways, because I have to, because that's my personal experience. I have to speak from there, but this kind of stuff is happening, I think, in other organizations. California is getting ready to pass the first laws where there will be laws that will protect people against psychological abuse in the workspace, because it's a thing. It is a thing, and it is a thing whose time has come to end. And, I'm speaking out about my experience, but I want to be clear. I don't think this is just a Landmark thing. I've talked to a lot of people. And
that's what I like so good about your
cover groups. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
I was just gonna say, I really like that the direction. Anne has just recently launched a show with Mark DeFoya, and I really like that the direction that you're taking the show in is to really kind of have it go bigger, because it does happen in other places, even though here we're deconstructing like how it got it.
We want to look at these sneaky questions, because in Richard's statement that he would never tolerate that, first of all, the people most susceptible to tolerate that and to fall for manipulation in cultic groups are people who think they never would. Rule number one. And I'm one of them. I was one. I would never be in Scientology. I was so proud. I was never in Scientology. I have this whole thing about I was so proud I never got into Scientology or Amway. Yeah, except for I'm in Scientology Light. So more news that's going to be coming out, but Landmark is based in Scientology hugely. I'm now talking to all these Scientologists comparing notes, and I'm just like, whoa! I just watched Going Clear.
Me too. I just watched Going Clear, and I was like, what?
And then I had somebody I had somebody who called me because I now have a lot of people who were around in the S days and the Werner Erhard days. In fact, we're very excited. We're going to be interviewing one, Mark and I, this Friday, who was there in the room at the creation of the forum when it moved from S to the forum, and we're going to ask him for all his stories and all that. And there was somebody who was there at the beginning of Est, and they literally took the Scientology dictionary and started retranslating the words. So there's so much to learn about this work, where it came from, what it originated, what about it really works, what seems like it works or works temporarily versus, what doesn't. What I know does work, though, is people committed to making a difference in their own lives. So that's the message in my book, is that Landmark was never the source of your transformation. Neither was Werner, neither was your forum leader, neither was anything. You were. It was always you all of the time. And you took those tools and you did miraculous, amazing things with them, or you didn't. So, and you were going to do that anyway, whether you got those tools or other tools. You do it with other tools that you get now, that you are the source of your transformation. That's all it's ever been. And that's kind of part of my, I got to make something good out of this, or I literally would just cry myself to sleep every night. But that concerns me when somebody says, if I was there, it wouldn't happen. Or if, there's reasons you didn't see it. There's reasons I didn't see it. It's not because it wasn't there. It's because I didn't know what I was looking at.
I should have reported this. I should have filed a police report when it happened. Mm-hmm. It didn't even register for me.
Erik, it was just like 4 weeks ago. My husband and I were talking about your story, and we're like in my kitchen. My husband was a registration manager, center manager for many years, brilliant man, fabulous center manager. He was one of the ones that took the abuse rather than pass it on. And he said, he and I were just talking through this whole thing, and we were talking about this whole, tell somebody that can do something about it. And we're kind of like, why that didn't work and why so many people. And all of a sudden Dave looks at me and he goes, oh my God, the person who can do something about abuse is the police. Literally until right. 4 weeks ago. Right. We were like, no,
wait a minute.
I was the one.
Somebody commented something on here. I was going to say, somebody commented on here and they said, you are doing something about it. You are talking to the people who can do something about it. That's talking about it publicly, is talking to someone who can do something about it.
I am now. But it took me, I want to be honest, it took me a long time to get here. It took me a long, long, long time. And even when I started hearing about the worst of the abuse, I am proud of myself. I would find out later I was the only person that had ever told these people this. I was the only person that ever said, if what you're saying to me is that he is physically harming you, you should go to the police. And much later, when they would come back around and really fill me in on all the details and really tell me the detail of what had been after they had left, they said, we went to several people. We went to Joe, we went to Harry, we went to, those are the ones I'll name, but they went to other people, and never once did anybody ever say that if you are being physically harmed, get to safety and call the police, except for me. So I was very proud of that. Now, I didn't recognize verbal abuse, that the verbal abuse that I had been seeing for a long time. And mostly I didn't what I thought was people being confronted about becoming their higher self was actually terrorized people. They were terrified. And, I had to learn. And it has not been easy. I watched Phoenix Rising, which is the Evan Rachel Wood story. It's very hard to watch, but I think every human should watch it. If you want to understand how good, smart people end up in compromising positions, which is every single one of us. There's not anybody watching this, listening to this, talking to this, that could not end up in a situation where they were being manipulated, exploited, abused, or even assaulted. And by somebody they know, trust, and love, because we just haven't educated ourselves really about what that looks like, how it's a long, slow train. It doesn't usually happen overnight. People are groomed. We were groomed in Landmark. We were all of that.
Oh, yeah.
Now, none of that erases, did I get value? Absolutely. And you know what? I love it every day, and I'm going to keep using it. Both things are true.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Well, I think we should transition to the Q&A. I'm gonna do this quick little video, and everyone, if you've got questions, I have some that I want to pick that were asked earlier. I know we've been kind of answering the questions as we've gone along anyway, but if you do have a question, now would be a good time to ask. It could be really anything. We can circle back to some of the stuff we talked in the beginning.
And really, one of the things that Landmark has been heard to say, some people at Landmark have been heard to say, and I do know who they are. I'll talk about that on my own show, but that I don't, I have not been available for comment or questions. Blatantly untrue. But tonight is one of those things. So if you have any questions about anything in my book or whatnot, I'm here. I'll answer.
We're going to talk about what's next.
We found this information useful in deconstructing our experience and coming to the opinion we were in a high control group. Mormon Stories podcast has a great detailed episode on what is undue influence, recovering from a cult with Dr. Stephen Hassan. If you have joined us late or haven't had a chance yet, please subscribe to the channel and like this video.
And I know you're going to address this in your show, but I do want to say something.
Sure.
If there is anybody that wants to have a conversation with myself or Brian, or, and you can speak for it yourself, but we are not difficult to get a hold of. We have public Facebook profiles. You can send us a message on our YouTube channel. It is not difficult to reach us whatsoever. So please, if you would like to have a conversation about this, please reach out. We would be open to it. And
including Landmark, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'm mostly saying it for Landmark because
I'm not willing to have Landmark on my. I'm not willing to have a Landmark representative on my show, but I have talked to the folks at Seek Safely and the folks that are a little bit culty, and they would be more than happy to give them space to come and talk, to answer some of these questions, to tell us about their new era, like whatever. They will host that. I'm not willing to do it because of the aforementioned. Well, my lawyer said that would be stupid. But also because I've spent enough years being gaslit. I don't need to play that.
Yeah.
I would only talk with them with an intermediary.
So somebody asks, can you recap the breaking news? Well, at the very beginning, we started the show with the breaking news, which was that Landmark announced that they are laying off a significant portion of their staff. We've heard that they're going to be laying off about 70% of their staff, citing historic low levels and lack of participation. It's projected that Landmark is going to reach about $11 million in revenue. And I shared when I was a staff member, I haven't been a staff member. I haven't been around in about 10 years. So Landmark at the time had revenues that were in the 90 millions. So, that's significant. And in 2019, the revenues were around $41 million. So the breaking news was that some of the program leaders and some of those people are getting let go. I've talked to some staff members because I still have relationships with people at Landmark. By the way, sometimes people say, well, you're just anti-Landmark, and that's just not the case. I have some great relationships with people who are there. Hello. So, my heart goes out to I just want to finish here that my heart goes out to those people who are going through this and who are going to be getting let go after giving of themselves for so long. And by the way, most of these people are such incredible humans. I can't speak to about all of them, but they're going to walk away and they're going to say they have a positive attitude. But as someone who left, I can tell you they've got a whole lot of healing to go through because that's what every single staff member has left.
Do a mini PSA about please do not sign non-disclosure and NDAs or any such things.
Don't sign any of that stuff.
I don't have verification of this, but that the folks in Canada are being offered significant severance packages in exchange for signing NDAs. And I would just urge people, something I didn't do while I was at Landmark is take any agreements to a lawyer, reach out to us. We'll get you in touch with a pro bono lawyer, who will look at stuff and just tell you the honest to goodness truth. If somebody's trying to
Yeah.
pay you off, it's usually not in your best interest.
Do not sign anything unless you've talked to a lawyer. And gosh, we might have an influx of people reaching out, but we do have those contacts. And because we know some people that have signed documents, and unfortunately they can't speak. And oh, by the way, that's why we're speaking, because there are people who have signed documents that prohibit them from speaking in exchange for monetary compensation, in exchange for settlement, because that's what Landmark does. The Landmark settles their cases because they don't want it to get out. They don't want it to get to discovery. They don't want to get into any of that.
Look, and if they settled, I talk about this in my book. Like, if we really wanted to create a place for reconciliation, truth has to be able to be told. And let's be honest, it's very challenging, particularly in the United States. Truth being told could be it could put a company out of business. So it's not just Landmark who has a problem telling the truth. We have not created an environment in which the truth is not in the legal sense. It can be a lot of trouble. So, Richard Lang, you're on there talking about there's changes being made. Hey, if somebody wants to tell me about those and they're legit, I will happily talk about that as well. I can talk out here. I'm not going to get in trouble for talking about what Landmark's doing right either. And I'm happy to do it. That's one of the reasons I sort of elected myself, because I knew that I could trust myself. I could count on myself to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it, because that's what I believe. We have to talk about all of it. Why? Because if we can't talk about all of it, one, we can't heal, we can't reconcile. Without restitution, there's none of that. I'm going to do a whole show about this, like looking at that whole process, but we definitely can't do better. How can we do better as an industry, as an organization? Landmark is folding in on itself because of its old-fashioned, outdated, and bad practices. And that is why it's folding in on itself. So are many organizations just like them. They're folding in on themselves because they're no longer those practices, those products, those practices aren't going to fit in the new marketplace where we're going. And I issue a challenge at the end of my book. I think Landmark could have, I'm much more skeptical now than when I published the book, but could be a leader in signing on to the Seek Safely movement. But they would have to do some deep, deep work. Jennifer Clark, I love I got to talk to Jennifer today for about an hour. It was amazing. And she was on your guys' show talking about breaking down the kind of, the systemic racism and sexism and hierarchical systems that don't work that are inside. I mean, they would have to do some deep work, starting with questioning Werner's ideas. I think Werner's ideas, a lot of them weren't Werner's ideas, but a lot of those ideas, there's great nuggets in those ideas, but we've learned a lot since 1971.
Totally.
71 through the 80s, really. And look, I sat in rooms where Werner was creating new stuff. And now that I'm learning about the old stuff, it's not very new. There's a couple new things. But it's not very new.
I always thought it was hilarious how Landmark was releasing the newly redesigned Landmark Forum, and it was like the same stuff, just a little different. So anyway, we can stop. We can stop talking about Landmark for a second. And somebody asked a really good question, and I really wanted to get into this today, which is what's next? I mean, where do we go from here? Like, you wrote the book, people have shared their stories with you. Landmark is on the verge of going out of business. They have been since the pandemic. They're scrambling to figure it out. Who knows if they're going to come out on top? It's like, I saw somebody comment, because we share a lot of the same things. It said, I tried to save Landmark, but it looks like it wasn't successful, whatever. Somebody had been
Hundreds
around
of people
for a long
have tried
time.
to save Landmark for you. I read there was a whole story. It was on the big news channel in Australia. There was a whole team of like 160 people that got together and came up with all these business people, all these suggestions and answers, sent a contingent to San Francisco to try and like sit them down and say, hey, we can save Landmark. We're business people. We know how to do it. And they were turned away. I don't know whether
they're not interested. I mean,
so who knows?
Maybe. I was going to say maybe with Harry and Joan gone and some of the senior leadership that's kind of perpetrated this, and if the board was completely gone, maybe they stand a chance. I don't know.
But you'd have to get rid of Kevin Harmon has been training to be Joan Rosenberg since 2004. So I don't have any.
He's got to go. He's got to
Yeah,
go.
because that whole thing of continuation, that's part of the problem. That's what I mean. They got to look at the source as the problem. And that's, it's my understanding that kind of happens in almost every company at a certain point, is that the source becomes the problem, right? The founder becomes the problem. So I think Landmark has passed that, and they've hung on mostly because they have a lot of really amazing people that are willing to put up with a lot of crap in order to because they want to see something transformational happen in the lives of others. And they thought this was a place and a way to do that.
So let's see here. Let's get into some of these questions. So we can kind of, the way Brian and I do them was we just kind of burn through these, you know.
Sure.
So somebody's asking, do you know if they intend to apologize and be specific about the harm they've caused?
Oh, that's
they're
in
asking
response
somebody
to
else.
Richard Lang talking about he knows they're trying to change.
And I know they are too. You know,
hey,
they're doing this
let us
whole
know
new
what some
air
of them
stuff.
are.
Yeah, we'd
So
love
far,
to
it's
hear
not
it.
looking
They haven't shared anything with us. They've been trying since the pandemic. It's not working. I mean, it's like every year participation is continuing to low. I know they're doing this new subscription stuff, but that's just all business. I mean,
hey, I got a
and
call
it
3
would be,
weeks ago about Kevin Harmon screaming his head off at staff. So verbal abuse is still going on. And
it's still
I've lost
happening.
track of how many policies there were to not yell at staff. So
Now,
it's not
Mick Levitt may be trying to do something
Mick Levitt's a
different.
great guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he may be trying. I don't know. We'd love to hear it. We haven't heard any of it. It would be great if we could, you know, start to have a conversation with this, but let's see here.
Yes, the recent announcement from Landmark does include Harry and Joan stepping down. So as of Friday, Joan is, this is what we were told, you know, what we were told was said is that Joan is completing as the center, as the head of the centers division. Kevin is taking her place. That's been in motion for, like I said, 2015, I think was the first time that we know of that he went and, you know, he traveled to the world headquarters to sit there and because he's going to replace her. So that's been in motion for a long time, but it's finally happening. It was actually slated to happen in 2020 and then didn't because of the pandemic. And but
Harry's been on his way out. Harry's also
was,
completing. He's been on his way
Harry
out for a long
off
time,
the
and
board,
Mick's taking over.
And Mick's he's completing, and Mick is he's the president, and he'll be stepping in. So I do think there's some possibility that Mick didn't know about all of this stuff going on with Warner. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I do think that's a possibility that I leave open, that he's, you know, trying to save an organization without all the information himself.
Yeah, I don't know if he was privy to a lot of what's been happening. We haven't heard from Mick. You know, So somebody's asking, and I think it's a really good question. How are you balancing all the difference the programs made to your life and the difference that you made to the thousands of people's lives through those programs? All I hear is to burn it down. And look, that's a genuine question. If I can answer this one, Anne, because
how about you answer it for you and I'll answer it for me, because we might have slightly different things. But you go first.
Well, I participated in Landmark's programs when I was a teenager. Okay, I was 15. And when I participated in the Landmark Forum, I remember walking out of the Landmark Forum so confident, and I've shared this before, with vision. Now that I'm starting to understand what it was that I experienced was essentially a dopamine hit after participating in a large group awareness training. And Brian and I are going to have Dr. John Hunter on this podcast soon, who has been studying what happens in the brain during a large group awareness training. And but how am I reconciling this? There are people who reach out to me who, when I was a staff member, some people who I hired, and there are other people who assisted with me, and there are other people who participated in some of my programs who say, Erik, you made such a difference for me in my life. And I'm clear that I was great, and I'm clear that I was great with people, and I would have been great with people at Landmark, and that I would have been I'm great with people now who are clients of mine, or who, when I walk on a job site and I've got to work with people, I'm clear that I'm making a difference for that person. Now, I've never said that it's my intention to burn Landmark to the ground. I think they're doing a pretty good job at doing that themselves, honestly.
Yeah, reporting
I
on the
think,
burning is not burning.
yeah, yeah.
In fact, it's
The
kind of the opposite, actually. I mean, Coach Gio, I have deep wonderings if you've actually read my book, because I think you'll see a very
That would be
different
a good
answer to the
start.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't actually have any commitment to. I don't have any commitment to them one way or the other. That's really and that's a big change. Like when the day I published the book, I had a piece of my heart that was really hoping that they would hear the message, and that they would, because they hadn't been hearing it in all the other ways. Like, people are going to them and all this stuff. I didn't know about all the lawsuits then. I didn't know all that then. What I know now is probably 2 other books worth. But my intention was warning, 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 heading off a cliff, heading off a cliff, heading off a cliff. Why would I do that if I wanted to burn them to the ground? Why would I risk my personal, safety? Everybody knows Landmark has been historically very litigious. Big kudos to them that they haven't sued me yet, honestly. I was committed to talking about both the good and the bad. If somebody calls me with information, says, "Oh my God, they've just put in this a new initiative and this is how they're doing it different," and I will shout that from the rooftops. I don't have any problem with that. I'm not the one burning them to the ground. I'm the one telling the truth. And if the truth burns them to the ground, then they were already burning. That's not,
Yeah.
that's like saying the people who report the crime are the same as the criminals. It's just not the case. People who report the crime are reporting the crime because they want to live in a safe community. I'm reporting the crime because I want to stay in the personal growth industry. And the industry right now is having a major metamorphosis and a major coming to Jesus, as it were, about what have been bad practices, bad habits, all kinds of things. It's not just at Landmark. Landmark is not alone in this. And that's my commitment. My commitment is to a safe and ethical self-development world. And unfortunately, that goes through the bad news. It doesn't go around it. It doesn't happen by burying it. That doesn't happen. What has been heartbreaking is I have found out that there's so much more pain and hurt than I understood. So I've kind of taken a pause a little bit on my own plans. I just got with Dr. Rachel Bernstein. We just lit up a LGAT, high control recovery, therapeutically based group for literally, like, basically whatever you can contribute to be in it, because there's so much healing that needs, and understanding that needs to happen. We can't do better if we don't understand what we have been doing.
And that's kind of, I agree. We have to do better. And that's kind of where I was kind of going to, where I was going to say, it's like, you participate, I participated, but then there's the whole dark side of Landmark that has to completely go. And that's the part where,
and every other organization like them, and all the ones that have learned from Landmark and are out doing even worse things, which even Landmark has been trying to protect against for years. I mean,
right. There are other organizations that have done and that are doing way worse, but that's what we're seeking to expose. We haven't even really, and it's not really my place to pick apart the forum or the where the distinctions came from or any of that, just because that wasn't my experience. I only share from my experience as someone who was a staff member, someone who led programs, someone who assisted and experienced, the abuse that happens when you're in that position. So
the other thing, Eric, I mean, I don't want to take us out because I think we're getting ready to wrap up here, but maybe we can do a whole, as more information gets revealed. But the other thing is, literally, I'm going to be hosting a Seek Safely Summit. We're going to do this year we're going to do an online version, the 1st of October, in the beginning week of October. Next year, we're going to do it live. And I said to Dr. Glenn, I said, one of the sessions we need to have is what we know now we didn't know then. Well, one of the things we know now is LGATs are dangerous. And what do I mean by that? People are driven into manic states. And Landmark knows this. That's why they have those policies. And they're in a little bit of a pickle because due to some acts, they also can't discriminate against people. They can warn people. But there is definitely more to do than what they're doing. They used to do a lot more. They knew in the beginning. My guest on Friday, the guest we're going to have on Friday, is actually going to tell us. He's a psychologist. He was part of a team of psychologists that helped invent the forum. There was a whole psychologically based support system that was around that it's not around as long as I've known. I mean, my husband, when he was a center manager, when there was a well-being issue, he didn't call a psychologist. He called, whatever Landmark forum leader was in charge of well-being for that weekend, and then the legal department. So, but my point is we're learning too that a lot of the stuff is that it's dangerous. Now, is it dangerous for the majority? No. But in my world, one person, two people, three people being hospitalized, committing suicide, there are organizations like Landmark that have gone out of business for that. And Landmark, we have now found 4 cases that involve murder, several cases that involve suicide, where people who
I just found a case where there was somebody who's running a Ponzi scheme taking money from Landmark graduates. Like, what?
Oh, there's a couple. I know about a few of those that never made it to legal. Okay, anyway, so that we helped put down inside of Landmark. So it's not like there isn't good people in Landmark who are trying to mitigate for this stuff. Of course there are.
Of course, yes. And we know some of those people, yeah.
Well, year after year after year after year after year, they continue. They don't fundamentally change the program. They don't fundamentally upgrade the content of the programs, the formatting. They haven't fundamentally changed staff. Like, they did a few things to make sure they were within wage and hour laws. But somebody told me today they were looking at their girlfriend's pay thing last week and figured out that Landmark was mispaying them. Now, it got corrected, but I'm just saying that the problems are persistent over time. Maybe with the Rosenbergs out of the picture, might it change? I doubt it, because the people who are in their position have been being trained by them for 20 plus years. They wouldn't have even made it 20 years if they didn't buy into some of that mindset. Like,
right.
So I don't know. Like, there is really a piece of me that hopes if they go lean and mean and they adjust to the times and they really do the work, that can they pull it out? Maybe, but I'm only interested in that if they can do it by getting on the seeking safely game.
Well, they're going to try to sweep it under the rug, and they're going to try to, by like not addressing what we're talking about and what we're seeking to expose, by just saying we're in a new era, we want people to be complete, and now we're doing this, and we're not going to do any work on ourselves, but the only work we're going to do is we're going to hire these consultants who are going to tell us the best path forward. And that's
actually, I had a good friend, who does change in large organizations, and said, look, I'll come in and do that work with you. Now, I told that person that I would strongly not recommend that, only because Landmark kind of considers themselves the kings of the hill of that, and they think they're already doing it. But the results would say different. Their sales,
I was going to say, I don't know.
They've continued to be
11 million down from 90 down to from 40. Doesn't sound too good.
And one of the guests keeps asking,
sound like the leader.
Any idea who have had how many people have had cycle? That's an unanswerable question, because the only way to find out about that is if that goes all the way to legal action, which very few actually go all the way to legal action due to all kinds of reasons. Again, I highly recommend Phoenix Rising. One of the things that Evan Rachel Wood points to is our statute of limitations. Most people who've experienced trauma will take 7 to 10 years before they're even able to recognize their own trauma, let alone seek action against it. And most statute of limitations, the longest was 3 years. So
2 to 3 years, and that's it.
Yeah. So our legal system is not caught up with our understanding of trauma and abuse and those kinds of things. Coercive control. I think there was just one law that was just passed that was kind of related to coercive control, probably in California. But
and you probably know this, but like who you think there was a study that was done which basically said that it takes someone how many years before they actually recognize trauma as trauma?
It's 7 to 10. It's
7 to 10 years, but the statute of limitations are 2 to 3.
Right. Sometimes even a year.
It wasn't even until you wrote your book, and when I read some of the allegations of Warner's assault and abuse, that I realized, oh my gosh, I think I experienced something similar. Hey, I have another question for you. How about the future of self-help? What do you see with YouTube, Instagram, the community? Part of the magic was a center to connect, and that's so true. I just want to say something about that. I agree with that. Like, there was something about like connecting with people and like networking with people, even though you weren't allowed to do business with graduates, but there was something about the people, right? Like, where is this? Because I think people are like really hungry for like audiobooks. They're really hungry for books. They're really hungry for taking courses at your own pace. I know I am. Maybe retreats, but like, what's the future here? Because like you said, a lot of them are really struggling right now.
I'm one. I mean, I have an event company. We produce events, and we're pretty much dead in the water right now. But for that side of things, because we can't. There's a lot that's gone in. There's a lot actually of complexity in that question. It's such a good question, but and I'm with you. Um, the industry has really changed. So what it takes to market is actually quite significant. You have to have really significant amounts of money. Social media, the way the platforms have changed, privacy laws have come in, changed targeting. There's like a lot. Like I used to be able to $500 a month, $500 to $600 a month, and a good Facebook ad campaign could fill a course. I can't do that anymore.
And
So the other
I
part,
spoke just to that. I spoke to someone because I for a tad bit worked in the event space. I recently spoke to someone who is getting ready to do like this LGAT model
mhm,
event. Okay.
yep,
And they said their advertising budget to produce the magnitude event they wanted to produce was $100,000
yep,
just in marketing. And by the way, it was going to take them 6 to 9 months to do this. Like, it wasn't just like we're going to run an ad and we're doing a course. It was like, we got to build an audience. And then after we
yep,
build an audience, we have to nurture that audience. And then after we
yep.
nurture that audience, we got to make them an offer.
And then
It's just like,
through that time, that audience has probably gone 10 other directions and heard from 15 other people. So events are
totally.
very expensive. So that's the other thing. Events are very, very, not just that marketing budget, but the commitment to space and time. I've lost close to $500,000 in the last 5 years alone, and just lost contracts. So is Landmark. I mean, this is part of why Landmark is having the troubles it's having. Its troubles aren't all because of its bad practices. It's literally a perfect storm between the pandemic, what's happening in the marketplace. People are starting to come back together into gatherings, but most people in the event space will tell you that events break even at best. What they do events for are what's called lost leaders. They do events in order to make money on the ensuing sales, maybe coaching or product sales or sponsorship sales. So the industry is complicated and it's shifting enormously. I do agree though, and there's a really cruel joke here. I was the first person, other than Werner did it in the 1970s. He did the big screen on television thing at the Felt Center in New York. But in the Landmark era, in Richard, plug your ears because I wasn't supposed to do any of this. But I was bringing on. I did it on my own computer, Richard. I didn't do it on a Landmark computer. So Richard used to run the computers, and I
I
hope he's
know.
still
I
in here
remember
laughing
Richard.
his butt
Yeah.
off.
I think
Anyway,
he's gone,
I
but
turned
yeah.
in when I went off staff and there's the whole thing. I went off staff, became an employee, and one of the things I did was turn in my computer and go get a MacBook. But anyway, so I
Oh,
also started hosting out of area wisdom people. I started adding out of area people into our classrooms via WebEx, right? Like when it was just a brand new thing. And so I was like this huge advocate for putting the programs online, because then people who were in Calgary and these places way far away could have access to programs. And I started doing it.
you didn't have approval.
I
Richard would
started
have been
doing it.
pretty upset.
Yeah. Well, Wisdom Area, we had a little bit more freedom, but literally I didn't tell Andrea till after I did it and it was successful.
Yeah.
And then it was really successful. And then we did at the year end, I'm like, Andrea, we can do this. We can do this. We can bring on hundreds of people. And we did it. And we had this giant, we had like 600 people. We crashed the system for like 90 minutes of the 3 hours. It was like a total mess, but we did it. And I showed her, and Andrea was in the back of the room and she's like crying. And I said, see, we can expand programs by doing them online. But what they missed, and what I said it at the time, I said, just don't make the mistake of having online programs replace in-person programs. They were an augmentation, they were an ad, or they were a line extension in business. They were something that could be added to expand. They were not a replacement. And the pandemic forced a certain level of replacement. So that's
Yeah.
no, everybody's grappling with that. But where we
And I
are
want
now
to say,
finding out, it doesn't work very well because of exactly what that guest was talking about, is you don't get that group experience. So, and Landmark's
yeah,
entire model depends on that group experience. So
yes. Well, and the business model. So, somebody said, let's start a grassroots LGAT company. And I just want to say something, because we are going to have Dr. John Hunter on the show. There's something to being with people that you cannot replace going on Zoom. The Zoom burnout thing is a thing.
And you can
But
have
where it
group.
gets
Oh, go ahead.
dangerous is, well, I was going to say, well, where it gets dangerous is they exploit people when they're at their peak. So
Right.
you're at your peak and you're not thinking clearly, you're thinking emotionally, and right there in that spot, you're now going to sign up for, you're now going to make some pretty significant choices, and they continue to keep you in that dopamine high without you having to like stop for a second, pause, and come back from the 2 week high, and then make like an actual decision, make a choice. Like, is this really like the path forward? And so that's where the LGAT model gets dangerous.
But
And we're
here's
going
a
to talk. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
you guys are going to talk to John. We're giving him a stage all over the place. I'm bringing him to the Sleep Safely Summit. Because he's one of the few academics that are really studying this in a really fair way.
He's really
Campbell wrote a great paper about 12 years ago also about him. But you can have group programs without having what has made LGATs dangerous. So I'm really working with Dr. John Hunter for part of our safe practitioner work that we're offering. We are looking at how do I hold a group program and have it be safe? You can do that. You got to understand what makes it unsafe, which is uncomfortable to look at. But I do it. I do my diamond approach work. We have group retreats every quarter. I absolutely love them. But the structure, it's the same. We're sitting in chairs. Although I used to make people really wrong because they would come in with like all these pillows and blankets and butt things and footstools and blah, blah, blah. I was like, these people are pansies. Anyway, I want y'all to know I now have all that stuff when I go to a retreat. I have my special retreat socks, the whole thing. It's so great. So you get to be totally comfortable. You get to sit by whoever you want.
I've never been to one of those.
Oh, it's hilarious. And, but I leave those retreats and I am refreshed. I'm relaxed. You don't meet. We have maybe 2 sessions in a day. You have lots of time in between. There's certain components that make an LGAT dangerous and literally set up an environment for people to have psychotic breaks. And we've known that for a long time. Our knowledge has expanded on that. And, and I think in some ways, I think Landmark has tried to change to mitigate those things. But the problem is their program depended on those things. Now that I'm studying the roots of the program and talking to people who were
company
there
is
at
dependent
convention,
on it.
It depended on those things. So they really do have to reimagine their whole product actually to fit into the modern world. And
completely. Yeah. The whole thing, the entire thing. So
good luck. All right, where are we at, Eric?
All right. Well, I think I got most of the questions. Let's see. Well, Rich, let's just end it with Richard's question because I think it's really good. When someone sits at their PC, how can you call that a large group awareness training? And it's still large group awareness training. The PC aspect
is taken a lot out of it, actually.
It's different, yeah, and it's why it's not as effective. I mean, why Landmark isn't having. Look,
but they've left stuff like in there.
The New York Center.
They've left some.
I'll just say they're trying to, but they're trying to run it like a large group awareness training online. They're trying to run it that way, and it's just not going to work. It's part of the problem why it's not working, because you're missing that live component. The New York Center used to have 3 Landmark forums live in person a month. I mean, they're not doing that anymore. So I don't think
there's more to what makes an LGAT than it's not. So part of the conflation is in Landmark, we used to talk about the group dynamic, and that the group dynamic is what made it successful. And there are aspects in group therapy sessions. Groups have been proven to accelerate learning. That's definitely a component. But the problem is there's a lot more that's going in that's making an LGAT. Eric, maybe we should post in the show notes the interview. My favorite one is John Hunter with Chris Shelton, because it's kind of the most succinct to the Landmark world, the Landmark style LGAT. He's actually doing a LifeSpring, which LifeSpring's a blah, blah, blah. But anyway, But there's more that makes an LGAT, and they're still doing it. I talked with somebody 2 months ago, read my book, did the forum. She was already registered for the forum, read my book before it started, called me on the Monday to tell me about it. And I said, what do you think? And I said, I'm dying to know, like, how was it? And how was it online? And like all this stuff. And She was really great. She said, I got some stuff. She says, I think the way they've packaged some ideas is really useful. I saw some useful things. And she goes, and I think it's dangerous as fuck. And I said, whoa, why do you say that? And she said, well, I don't understand why they kept trying to drive us down into that we were rackets and we were assholes. So I was surprised to actually hear that in there, because in my time, a lot of that had kind of come out. But I do know Warner's been working a lot with the forum leaders.
So it's still happening.
Well, I think it's re-happening because Warner started working with the forum leaders. I mean, he's always worked with them to some extent, but I know in 2015, because I was in some rooms where he was talking, he told us about it. He started working with them again, and he's doubling down on his approach, which is highly confrontational. And that's just not going to fly in today's market. Is definitely not going to fly online, because people can just go, whoop,
I'm out.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. They have to go to this. They don't need to go to the source. He doesn't know. He's old. That's not what I mean. They have to look. They have to redesign for the world we're living in today, and the customer that we are today, and the human that we are today.
Correct. We've been through some stuff since 2020. So the human, we are a different society. We're a different human. We're a different consumer. And so, yeah. And Saban says something about,
you're funny.
I know she's funny. Saban's saying this thing about it being effective. Well, I still have to.
That's why we're talking, Eric. We're not talking to bring Landmark down. We're talking because we do believe in self-development. We do believe in personal development, and we believe that we need to upgrade. And unfortunately for Landmark and LifeSpring and Context and all the other groups like them, upgrades often come by looking honestly at what is no longer working. Like, we don't have to make it wrong even to do that, but we can acknowledge it doesn't work. And why
some real R&D
revenues are at 11 million instead of 90.
It's awful. So. It's like 10%. Gosh.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap here. And thank you so much for being here.
These conversations always go like so many crazy places. We lay it out, but anyway. We'll keep talking.
I know. I started with I wanted to cover some of the meaty kind of stuff that there's been a lot of misinformation circling around. And I also, not only that, but sometimes people say we're just talking, but we're really doing a lot of research, and we're really deconstructing what we went through, what we experienced. This isn't just like us getting on. It's just us reading and researching and studying. That's why it's going to be so important. Talking to experts. It's, by the way, we're talking like real experts, like not the people that claim to be expert. I'm no expert in any of this field, and that's why it's so good.
Well, they don't have any axe to grind nor benefit to gain. They're really looking to look and say, and by the way, which includes Rick Ross, which I know we were taught he's the devil, but I have to say he's been one of the most defensive of Landmark that I've talked to. It shocks me every time. So
because we were trained to think that Rick Ross was like you said, the devil. In our corporate Q&As, he was Eric, against Landmark. So
can we just in wrap up, I would like, and just kind of to bring it full circle, because we started this with just really sending our hearts out to our friends that are losing their jobs right now, and in some cases losing their future. We have lots of friends whose retirement accounts have been sacked, like all this stuff. It's confusing, it's whatnot. And I do really I'm so excited about Rachel Bernstein's offer to be it's not just a group. It's a group that's I asked her to come and facilitate, because it needs to be somebody who's trauma informed and has that therapeutic background, but she's also a cult education expert. So, and she's just got a huge heart. She's amazing. She has a fantastic podcast herself, Indoctrination. But I do want to make that available to anybody who feels like they have experienced any negative impacts from their participation at any level, whether it was staff, assisting, whatnot, or of any other group. It's not, Landmark does not have the corner on the market of this stuff. There's a lot of other groups that've got these same problems. What's funny is Warner and Hanukkah would take all the credit because they always say everything spun off of them. And a lot did.
Right.
But a lot spun out of Est. But I just want to make that available to as many people as possible as could possibly use it. We deliberately set it up so that it could take take care of a lot of people. And in Landmark, if you want to start doing some restitution, you're more than welcome to contribute to that. And I will shout your name from the rooftop that you are really doing things to help
That would be a
people
good. That would be a good
who have
starting
been
point.
damaged or hurt by your programs and or your staff experience. That's mostly the staff.
It's mostly the staff, really. And my heart also goes out to all those staff losing their jobs and who've been there for years. And there are some where, it's time to go. The Jones.
In the end, it'll be a really good thing. I had on the one hand, I'm like, oh, that's going to hurt. But in the end, it will turn out as it has for all of us. As you get further away, you start to get employed for reasonable rates. Life's good outside of
life is so much better.
Yeah,
it really is.
It'll work. But they need support. They need.
So that group's good, and we'll pin that group with Dr. Rachel Bernstein.
I'll give you the link.
I think that's good. Yeah, that'd be great. Well, thank you all for joining us. We'll be back next week with Brian will be back and join Ann and Mark on their show coming up soon as well. So thanks so much, Ann.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everybody.
Please join us live next week at 8 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Pacific for another cut of this conversation. We want to thank you for watching or listening and appreciate your support. Please share this with those you think it could help. We understand this can be a lot of overwhelming information and emotions can run high. So above all, please be kind to yourself and others. As new information comes to light, you are always free to change your mind and take a different path. That is the power in engaging in the question, how did I get here?